Grand dawning, great rising, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be in the planet or on the planet. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. Today, I have a very special guest with us, and he is here in advance of a program that he's going to be doing at Larchmere Arts on the 24th of January. He is Tehuti Khamau. He's the chief priest for the Ausar Auset Society International in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and southern New Jersey. With over 40 years of teaching, he leads Kamitic meditation workshops that translate ancient Ausarian principles into clear, repeatable practice. To support participants beyond the sessions, he has developed the Kamitic Spiritual Journal, an annual planner, lunar calendar, and practice log designed to anchor meditation and track progress. We're really excited about having him here in Cleveland, and we are pleased to welcome him to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My brother, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm great. Very thankful to be here and good to see you, Vince, and to be able to talk to the good people of Cleveland and beyond.
Okay. So the event that you're doing is a Kamitic meditation workshop. Tell us what is entailed in Kamitic meditation.
Well, meditation, as you know, Vince, is a very powerful part of people who have been exposed to and practice meditation. It's a very important part of their life. And I'm convinced after 40 years of teaching and counseling people, as well as having the experience as a father, now a grandfather, a coach, that meditation really is our most valuable practice, And here we are at the beginning of a new year that brings a number of stress triggers for a lot of us. And our folks need to know that if you're not competent in meditation practices, right, that's something that you can learn and implement this year that I guarantee you will make a tremendous difference in your life and in your performance of everything that's demanded of you this year. So I'm excited to be able to come to Cleveland, and those of you in the sound of our voices, and maybe even in parts of PA and Kentucky and other areas around, I would urge you to join us on the 24th for a meditation workshop that will change your life.
Okay. So the workshop is going to take place between 4 and 7 p.m. on the 24th of January at Larchmere Arts. The address there is 12726 Larchmere Boulevard. And so all you have to do is show up, and we will see where things go, and we're really looking forward to it. And brother, I'm Tehuti Khamau. Meditation is something that we preach here in Cleveland all the time. I'm on this show, I'm on another show, and I'm telling you, it seems like every week we just bring up the fact that it is something that you should do. We have a very dear friend of the show. His name is Dr. James Brown. He is the person that actually brought Ausar Auset to me and opened my eyes to this phenomenon that has been life-changing. So if you could just talk about who you are, talk to us about what Ausar Auset is, and give us just a little bit of the history for those who don't know.
Sure. Well, Ausar Auset is the indigenous name of what the Greeks called Osiris and Isis, which is referring to the spiritual practices of the ancient Egyptians, known as the Khamau by their indigenous name, and the land of Kemet. Why is that important? Well, ancient Kemet was the height of civilization in Africa and throughout the world, and the breadbasket of culture and science that went on to nurture all European, Western civilization and science and so on, as most of your listeners are probably aware. But one of the greatest things about ancient Egypt that we attempt to model is the civil life the civilization, which really means people being able to function civilly, right? Which lasted for over 3 millennia, 3,000 years. We are here discussing this in the United States, which is about to celebrate somewhere around a semi-quincentennial, no, semi-quincentennial, I think they call it, 250 years, right? 250 years. And the very foundation of this this civilization, United States, as you can see, is under a lot of stress and challenge right now, and very unpredictable as to where we're going and how long it would last. So imagine civilization that lasts 3,000 years without falling apart from within. Eventually, it disperses because of waves and waves of invention. I mean, of invasion, right? But what is it that our ancestors in the Nile Valley knew that enabled them to build such a lasting egalitarian society? And I would argue it's rooted in their spiritual way of life, their spiritual philosophy. So Ausar Auset Society was founded in 1973 by Ra'un Nefer Amen. He's the author of the Meduniter series that many of you all are familiar with, as well as Ma'at 11 Laws and some total of 40 books. And the society was founded as a way of socializing and organizing ourselves around these high spiritual principles.
Okay. So you described it as perhaps a lifestyle. Would you also classify it as a religion, or would you be hesitant to put that label on it?
Well, religion's a tricky word nowadays. It literally means a science of coming back together, right? Or retying, which is supposed to retie you back to the supreme being, to the creator. So in that sense, it is a religious practice. A lot of us have a bad taste in our mouths from the history of quote unquote organized quote unquote religions that have used spiritual references to further their conquest, you know. So I would say it is a spiritual system that is aimed at helping to tie us back to the creator, however you would refer to the creator, and in order to live a prosperous, successful life on earth.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that we have conversations about is the divide between spirituality and religion. And I think perhaps what you are bringing into the picture is the connection between God and nature and spiritual practices. You know, when you talk about having a 13-month lunar calendar, for instance, that's directly tied to the cycles of nature because the moon operates in 28-day cycles. So, you know, we have kind of been disconnected from nature because of things that have happened historically, like when they made the decision to change from 13 months to 12 months. It kind of took everybody away from that intimate connection with nature. But what you're talking about is a connection between spirituality. You're talking about the connection that has with astrology and the connection that it has with meditation. I want to talk to you, if I could, just based on something that I read in one of the books that Ra'un Nefer Amen wrote. I think it was probably Medunetter Volume 4, The Ausarian Resurrection. And there's a place in the beginning of the book where he goes down a timeline. And I found this really interesting about 325 AD and the impact that had on our perception of human beings being divine beings. The paradigm shift that took place when we were all operating under the understanding that we were divine beings. And then we started adopting this idea that there was only one. Can you talk about the significance of that paradigm shift?
Absolutely. And the remnants of that that understanding that we're divine beings survives in all religions, if you know where to look for it. It's certainly in Christianity, where it is said that we were made in, that God made man in his likeness. And then even further on, when Jesus said that the things that he was doing, that we also will do, and much more. So the divinity of man and woman, by the way, which is something we need to talk about, because we didn't have this male-female chasm in our traditional culture. That's not an African thing. We had women that we recognized as divine beings as well as men. And we had women in our historical record that achieved sainthood, or what we called became an Ausar, thousands of years ago, right? So that's a very important distinction to make. But, you know, the practice of awakening the divine potential, right? Understanding that we are divine beings in potential, right? That is like our full development. Just like you look at a child and you recognize that child is an adult in potential, but there are things that that child needs to go through: education, discipline, guidance, structure, assistance, you know, mentorship, to develop into a full, healthy adult, or we should say a being that's manifesting adult behavior, because you can be adult chronologically and still be a child in your behavior, right? So in this same manner, the human being was made to come into full maturity as a vessel of the Most High, as a divine being. It is the right, the birthright and the God potential of every man and woman, but it is up to society to have evolved itself to the point where it can support and mentor and educate people to come up out of their childish, their animalistic, and their human nature. I'd like to give you an example, if I could.
Yes, please.
So in the Kamitic tradition, we understand, we can break down what divine behavior is into a series of laws that we call the 11 laws, right? And the highest law is that peace is your nature, right? Peace is your nature, meaning that your natural response to the challenges of life, your natural response to the abundance, to the lack, to the so-called stressful events, etc., in life, is for you to be at peace. Now, a person might say, well, wait a minute. How could you possibly be at peace if you just lost your job, if you lost your house, if you lost your spouse, if you made $10 million and now you're freaking out because you don't know who's coming at you, you know, on either side, right? I know this, the last example is probably one people want to try more than the others. But when you look at the reality of life, let's say, Vince, that your loved one was about to have heart surgery to save their life. And the surgeon that was about to perform that operation just lost the patient before your loved one. That's a tough situation, right? You would say, oh, that's a stressful situation. You know, naturally, I would be upset. Naturally, I might lose my clarity of focus. Naturally, I might be grieving. Naturally, I might be questioning my performance and my capability. I just lost somebody on the operating table, right? But what would you say to that surgeon? I expect you to get it together. Right? I expect you to be trained enough. I expect you to be experienced enough. I expect you to be cultivated enough to have the right mindset, to have the right habits, to be able to wash your hands, change your gown, and go into the next room and act as if that didn't even happen, so that you could be at your optimal performance to save the next person's life. Well, that's what we would call having cultivated inner peace, that person could take a hit and keep on going, right? That person could go through any type of experience and be able to still be centered and calm and peaceful and unaffected to the degree that they could continue to perform. So this is what we call the law of Amen. And we know there's people that can do that. We expect that people can do that. We expect that the police officer that's in a dark alley, right, in a situation where they could possibly lose their life if they don't perform properly, will not give in to fear, will not give in to anxiety, will not shoot an innocent person because they couldn't have the clarity of mind and calmness to distinguish between the person who is potentially dangerous to them and is actually in the act of doing something that could harm them or someone else, and a person that's just happens to be in the same location. So what I'm speaking to you about is this, what we call a law of Amen, is logically provable, right? And it's something that we already expect, but because we are not educated and conditioned and trained in this type of spirituality, we accept thoughts like, naturally I got upset. Naturally, since I lost XYZ, you know, I got mad and I shouted at my mate and I messed up my relationship. Hey, I'm only human, right? These are the thoughts that we're subject to when we don't have the proper spiritual orientation to understand that, no, we have a divine capability to rise above the animal instincts, the human mind and human thoughts, and to perform out of our divine identity.
You mentioned something a few moments ago that I want to come back to, and that is our perception of the divine. And we've been living with a patriarchal system. But when we think about our brothers and sisters on the continent of Africa, they didn't even have a word for God. And so now we live in an age where when we talk about who God is and what God is, we always talk about it as though God is a he. Could you talk about the Trinity of Ausar Auset and Heru, and how you have a divine feminine within that construct?
Certainly. I think your mic is a little. So yeah, I mean, I would differ with you on one thing there, that we didn't have a name. Actually, it's impossible to have one name that encapsulates what God is, right? And every time you use a name, you're limited by language. So if I say to you, Vince, you're a father, well, you're more than a father, right? Vince, you're a musician. You're more than a musician. You're a producer. You're more than a producer, right? So language is kind of that way. So what we talk about when we talk about the supreme being, when we talk about, even if I say the creator, that kind of gives us an idea that there was an intelligence that was present in the act of creation. But what about right now? Did it go away? So all we can do is talk about aspects, attributes, and functions of a being, right? And yes, there were many names. For example, Amen, but Amen really refers to the reality that the creator is imperceptible, right? It is immaterial. When you say, where is God? God cannot be seen, right? Because just like you and me, we can see this body. You can hear the sound I'm making. From the inside, I can perceive thoughts and emotions, but who I am, who you are, is a consciousness that cannot be perceived. That's the reason you can argue with your own thoughts. If you can have a conversation with your own thoughts and say, I'm not going to think that way, then who are you talking about when you say I? And the I within you cannot be seen. It's the seer that cannot be seen. So when we say God, Amen, We're not saying, oh, that's the name of God. We're referring to an attribute that, as you explore what is this divine consciousness, this being that has, you know, created this world and is administrating this world and so on, we're talking about that attribute of the creator that is immaterial, that is imperceptible, that is beyond physical matter. There's something beyond physical matter that has created physical matter, and that which has created physical matter cannot be perceived. So that is the concept that we divinize as amen. Why divinize? Because it's something that needs to be made holy, the process of understanding it, the process of working with it. Otherwise, we'll walk around thinking that God is not ever present because I can't see you. No, God is right there with us at all times. You see. So back to the Trinity. The Trinity, when we say and all the other neteru in the Kamitic tradition, which relates to the word nature that you mentioned earlier, are the functional attributes of God. So how do we refer to that aspect of God that is the center of our divine identity? We call that Ausar. And there are meditations, there are contemplations, there's study, there's spiritual work that helps us to get in touch with that reality and to cultivate that reality. How do we refer to the attribute of God that enables us to get on a path of devotion to cultivating our spiritual nature, our divinity? We refer to that as Auset. How do we refer to the attribute of God that God has shared with us as its so-called son, right? For its residence within us, we refer to that as Heru, which represents our will, which is the stamp of our divine nature. So Ausar, Auset, yes, there's a feminine attribute. There are, of course, feminine functions. There's nothing in the world that is unipolar, exclusively male. Even what we call men, human men, have feminine functions and hormones within us. And women have masculine as well, right? It's a matter of what part of us is dominant. So yes, to answer your question, and it reflected itself in the Ausarian society that we had women that actually ruled a nation as kings. We had women that ruled as high priestesses, women who owned their own land, their own business, functioned in their own right, and so forth. This is the greatness of our ancient ancestral tradition. And you know, our people, we need to be very familiar with that. It's not part of our culture to deny the feminine attribute of divinity. I'm not hearing you. Oh yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I'm so glad that you broke that down, and I'm glad that it's there for a reference for those who need to hear that again. So thank you for that. So much to talk about there. And when you talked about women as kings, I was thinking about Hatshepsut.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, and a magnificent temple structure. Have you visited there?
That's on my list for 2026. We'll see if the astrological forces will enable it to happen.
Okay.
But specifically, Tony Browder, who we were talking about earlier, he's having his last two trips to Egypt this year.
Yes.
So we'll see if I can schedule to be there.
I had the privilege and the pleasure of visiting, I'll call it Kemet. They call it Egypt. I like to call it Kemet. But I had the pleasure of visiting there back in 2019 with Dr. Renoko Rashidi, and actually a balloon ride over the Valley of the Kings, man. It's one of the most exciting things that I've ever done. So yeah, I'm happy for you to entertain the possibility of witnessing that as well as that now River Cruise and some of the other historic places that exist on that side of the world. So good for you. As I said before, I'm really happy for you about that. I want to talk about the power of meditation, because that's what's bringing you to Cleveland, and you were talking about that piece that I'm mindful of after reading Stress Free for Life, that
Yes,
it is a piece that cannot be disturbed. So, can you talk about the role of meditation in bringing you into a place where you can meet any challenge with a state of peace?
definitely. So it's two things. First of all, the most obvious effect of meditation is that you feel calm, that you feel peaceful, that the stress response within you subsides, and on a physiological basis, the cortisol, which is now, if we talk in modern scientific terms, this hormone, cortisol, is at the root of all of our diseases, excesses of cortisol, right? And this is stress hormone, cortisol, adrenaline, and so on, right? So when one goes into the meditation state, and we do that through structured breathing and other techniques we talk about, it lowers the cortisol adrenaline-like response that pumps up our sympathetic nervous system, right? That's the fight or flight that gets us ready to run, that gets us ready to fight and defend ourselves, right? But that response is not natural to the everyday challenges of life, like listening to the news. You know, I mean, you can't even listen to the news and see what's going on here and in the different parts of the world, and if you're not careful, notice that you go into a stress response. And unfortunately, it's something a lot of people do just before they go to bed. I don't know why they put that on 11 o'clock at night, right? So people, last thing or before, let me see what the weather is or whatever, and you got to hear this one killed, this one this one that, this one that, you know, and you don't even realize it, and you're invoking this stress response, right? Right before you take that into your sleep, you know. So learning how to meditate will help to ameliorate that. Will help you with that. Will relax you. Will help you to de-stress yourself, right? And when you learn how to meditate and you do it very regularly, you will find automatically that your threshold of being triggered, because stress is a response. Stress, as you mentioned, that great book, Stress Free for Life, it starts off in instructing us that stress is a response, right? It's not the situation itself. We just talked about a situation in an operating room that an untrained person or even a trained person could find stressful, stress invoking, but would have to learn how to transcend that response in order to keep functioning, right? So the stress response can be removed, and you'll find that automatically your stress response to situations will change, right? That's the first stage. You'll just be walking around saying, you know what? That doesn't bother me anymore, you know? Or that thing, I feel like at least I have a choice now, like because I've trained myself in how to relax, in how to de-stress, in how to breathe, in how to go into a different brainwave state. I now have such a automatic ability there that presents itself when I am being triggered. I have a choice now. And in some situations, you'll automatically just be able to do that. The second part is behavioral modification, which we can do for ourselves, right? Through the process of meditation. And that has to do with the next step of meditation, which is meditating. One is going into the meditation state. Two is what you do in the meditation state. So you can willfully remove stress triggers by calling to mind what triggers you and replacing the response in your subconscious. You can replace the stress response. The trigger's still there. Your wife still talk to you that way, your dog don't respect you, the challenge of the economics, the bills, all of that's still coming. The triggers still come, right? But you can diffuse the triggers so that instead of triggering your stress response, which destroys your health, increases your blood pressure, makes you more insulin resistant so that you develop blood sugar problems, right? Exhaust your stress hormone capability. So you find yourself, you can't get your motivation up. You can't get your drive up, right? You lost your zest, for the things that you need to do. It does all of that to you. It lowers your IQ. It distorts your clarity of mind. So you can decouple those things. The trigger and the response does not have to stay together. Through meditation, you can remove that so that you can safeguard your well-being and improve your performance. And that's really the message of this workshop we're having, is that what happens to you in 2026 is a mystery, right? There's things about it we don't know. But one thing we know for sure is that you're going to have to perform. You're going to have to perform. So what's your performance going to be like? Are you going to optimize your performance, or are you going to drag the same stuff that we all have from the last year and the year before and the what have you into 2026? Meditation can help you to change that.
Well, you talked about basically a survival mentality, a survival existence. If you're living in that stressed existence all of the time, it really prevents you from accessing your higher faculties. If you're in fight or flight all the time, then you're not thinking logically or whatever. And you mentioned how the news is at 11 o'clock, and then you watch the news and you go to bed and you have all that on your mind. And so what I thought for a long time is there is intentionality about that setup so that they can perpetuate that fight or flight. And so you never get any escape from the cortisol that's raging through your body, because it's like, well, they've turned on cortisol producing machines all over the planet. So to counteract that, there has to be a countermeasure. And it seems that what you're saying is that the countermeasure is a meditation practice.
The countermeasure is turn the TV off, do your meditation, and go to bed.
There it is.
That's one of the divine revelations of this month. Turn the TV off, do your meditation, right? And it's very powerful because, whether you're a conspiracy theorist or not, one certain conspiracy is making money. And bad news sells better than good news. So on the base, at the core of it, eyeballs make money. So yes, there's a conspiracy to constantly put in front of you traumatic things, because that's what make people say, man, did you hear XYZ? Who called you this morning, Vince, and said, man, did you hear about that young lady that, despite the odds, graduated, with honors, is going to graduate, got a great scholarship? No, but somebody got shot, somebody got killed, this happened, that gets our attention. So yes, there is a conspiracy to keep the bad news, in front of you, but it's all about advertising because they want to sell you stuff. But here's the thing, we need to run our own ads before we go to bed for what we want to happen in our lives. And that's what your meditation is. The things that you think about in an organized and intentional way need to be the last things you put into your subconscious or your spirit, if you will, before you go to sleep. The things that you visualize that you want to make happen in your life and that you want to happen for others, the people that you want to care for and bless and so on, that needs to be what occupies your attention, your intention. Your intention needs to command your attention. If your intention is not paid attention to, because you're paying attention to some other stuff, and that's what you're taking into, and you all know, everybody knows from experience that you've thought about things before you went to sleep, and that's what you dreamt about, right? It's happened to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It happens to us all, and that's our spirit letting us know, be careful what you think about before you go to bed. Even our grandparents used to say that, don't argue, don't go to bed like that, right? Because whatever your dominant pattern of thinking is before you go into sleep, you are taking that into your subconscious to process and to make happen in your life. So your intention needs to be the focus of your attention.
Yes. It's been mentioned by some online and in various places that one of the best things that you can do before you go to sleep is just to create a mindset of gratitude. And that mindset of gratitude is really what plugs you into the notion that we live in a universe of abundance as opposed to living in that universe of scarcity. Um, Talk about the relationship and or the difference between meditation and prayer.
Sure. So, and I'm glad you brought that up, because meditation is not itself a religious act, right? Some people, I don't meditate, I pray, or meditation just means going into this middle state, which is a state between being asleep and being awake. That's all it means. To meditate is to go into the alpha brainwave state, which is the state between being asleep and being awake. Why is that powerful? It's powerful because the sleep state is the state in which we have access to the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is the executive of what our will, what carries it out. The subconscious mind is what gets you out of bed in the morning. The subconscious mind, you can't see it, is what's reminding you to do this and to do that and to not say this and to not, right? That subconscious part of us is what's executing our dreams. So we want to have access to that, and we want to have intentionality. Intentionality is what the waking state is about, right? When you're intentionally walking across the street, you're wide awake. That's the state of your will or your intention. So in the meditation state, you have intentionality or enough wakefulness for you to determine your course. And you also have the subconscious, access to the subconscious, access to the psyche or the spirit, whatever terminology you want to use, the part of you that is connected with the creator and the natural forces of life, the part of you that is the soil of your automatic behavior, what you call your habits, right? So when you go into the meditation state, you have access to both parts of your being, and you can bring those together. So that's what meditation is. Now, whether you are praying to Allah or to Jesus Christ or to Shango or whatever your spiritual framework is, right? It is better if you're in the meditation state, right, than if you're just in the waking state. So meditation is a non-denominational practice. It is a scientific method of using your breath work and some other things you learn about your posture and what you do, your mental activity, to induce a certain state of consciousness, a certain brainwave state. Now, when you pray, you are using for the most part, verbal suggestion, right? You are reciting either out loud or in your mind, okay? And your ability to take that verbal suggestion and put it into your subconscious so your subconscious can work on it. Or from another framework, for God to hear you, meaning the higher creative spiritual power within you to receive your intention, right? It works better if you're in the meditation state.
Okay. So, want to get back to the whole notion of the winter solstice. Again, I let you know that I've had some conversations with Dr. Brown and attended some of the classes that he had here in Cleveland. And he told us that during that solstice, during that 4-day period, it is a time of the year when your subconscious is most receptive to those suggestions. Can you talk about the importance of intention setting during that period of time? And I know we've had conversation about, it being the entire season. So in essence, the whole winter season is that solstice, but those
Yes,
4 days are particularly important.
right. And the essence of what we need to understand about ourselves and about nature, being that we are designed, we have a natural design, is that everything within us, physically and metaphysically, psychically, subconscious, conscious part of us, everything operates according to cycles. And cycles just means an alternation, right? Just like what we're familiar with the day. So if you look at the cycle of the day, we were just talking about going to bed, right? Doing your meditation before you go to bed, making sure you're mindful of what you take into your sleep, right? Because why? You're going into the most receptive time of the day, where the subconscious is now going to work on your intention and process what you went through that day and prepare you for the next day, where the psychic part of you that anticipates and knows what you're going to be confronting is going to be working on these things. Well, the midnight or the depths of the night in the yearly cycle would be the winter solstice. The morning would be the spring, and noon would be the summer, right? So we're talking about the same cycle, but on a much grander scale. So in the course of the year, and we live our lives from year to year, don't we? You say, well, how old are you? You don't measure it in days or months or weeks, you measure it in years, right? Because the year is a complete, it's a day of our life, so to speak, right? We measure our lives in years, and we also plan our lives in years, right? We say, this year I'm going to do this, and we had this tradition handed down of the resolutions for the year, which is a crumb from the table of African spirituality that is a remnant left over. But there's still this subconscious thing like, okay, the year is changing. What am I going to do this year, right? Well, you know what? The same thing happens in a month, and that's called the full moon. So the full moon is to midnight during the day what the solstice is. It's all the same. It's just the size of the cycles. So the importance of the winter solstice is that, a year is very important in your life, and you want to make sure you prepare the inner part of the planning and cultivation of what you're going to do this year in the winter months. And the winter solstice is the initiation, the kickoff point of that winter season, right? In your Kamitic Astrological Journal, we focus on the monthly cycle, which is also very powerful and important. You know what's so powerful about the monthly cycle, brother? And you mentioned it, the 28 or so days that make up the lunar cycle is the same as the 28 or so days that makes up the ovulation cycle of a human female. That's not a coincidence. So we are able to impregnate, a woman is able to be impregnated on a monthly lunar cycle. Well, you can also give birth mentally to all of the things you need to create in your life on a monthly lunar cycle. So these cycles work together, the days, the months, and the years. And of course, the year cycle is more impactful, more important overall. But the months is what makes up the years. And of course, the months are made up by days. So it all kind of works together. So yes, in Kemet, they had several calendars. The people of ancient Egypt, a lot of our people don't know, are the ones that gave the solar calendar to the world. Right? And that Gregorian calendar you're using today is a derivative of what was learnt by the Greeks and then passed on in Egypt. You can't, it's not easy to observe a solar year. That takes a high science of mathematics and astronomy, observation, and so on. So our ancestors in Kemet gave us what we're using today as the solar year. Lunar year is easy. I mean, the month, you can look up in the sky and see it's 28 and 29 risings and fallings of the sun before the moon went from completely blank new moon to full and been back to,
I want to talk to you a little bit about the meditation practice, and I want to talk to you about the difference between the self and the not self. But just getting back to a meditation practice, one of the things that makes it challenging, and I'm speaking from personal experience, I live in a city, there's a fire station that's like 2 or 3 blocks away. So it's not uncommon for me to hear sirens and other noises. And I'm just wondering, from someone like you who is very proficient, how do you block out the things that are happening around you so that your mind can be clear? And is it possible for you to have absolutely nothing in your mind as you're in this meditative position?
Well, blocking it out is just a matter of practice. If I lived by a fire station, I might put on some noise canceling headset because that's not a natural, natural environment. Although the yogis say that you can transcend, being affected by noise. I would use it. I'll also use I use some nightshades, because sometimes you're in an area where the light, affects you. It's not going to detract from your practice. But one of the things about meditation, after practicing for many years, is the understanding that you can be very effective in a short period of time. You don't need to meditate for an hour to get powerful results. It's more powerful if you meditate for 15 minutes, 2-3 times a day, right? So you can do your best to find those quiet times, and your proficiency in meditation will allow you to take advantage of your environment in the way that it can. Can you make your mind totally blank? Yes, but it's not something that you would, this is my experience, that you will know until you come back. So they call that a samprajñāta samadhi in the yogic tradition, right? We call it amen, atem. We have the Ogdad, the 8 characteristics of being of consciousness, experiencing the unmanifested realm, right? So there is total darkness, total quiet, a lack of movement, peace, and so on. And it's not like you can be there and be like, I'm experiencing that, because that would not be it. But when you come out of it, you recognize that time stood still, so to speak. That's one of the markers of it. Like you think you've been there for 15 minutes and it's just been a couple of minutes, or the opposite. You thought it was just a minute and wow, I was there for 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
that's been my experience of it. What I did want to touch on, for folks who might be able to join us, is the astrological side of this.
Yes.
Right. And astrology is another science that came out of our astronomy, right? To create the solar calendar, you have to have advanced observation of stars over a long period of time. So that's astronomy, right? When you're observing the phenomena in the universe. Astrology is when people discovered that based on different conditions in the stars, in the movement of planets and heavenly bodies and so forth, behavioral things changed, right? So people and their behavior and their lives were affected by these different planetary movements, or really parts of cycles that were indicated by the movements of these heavenly bodies, stars, planets, and so on, right? Now, fast forward to today, again, like the crumbs off the table, the understanding of astrology that we've been handed is very, very primitive, right? Meaning that if I say to you, you know, what was your birthday? You say, oh, I'm a Leo. Okay, well, this is you, this is you, this is you. You know, that's only a small part of what makes up your personality. But more importantly, is that once we understand that cycles, meaning I'm going from your birthday, right, Vince? When were you born? I was born, what was the location? Okay, and what time? And now based on that, I can see certain things about your talents, your tendencies, your behavior. That's the base of astrology, right? But the inner secret of astrology is that the energies that allowed that to happen do not disappear after you're born. They're there all the time, and they're magnified by the full moon. So every month, there's an astrological energy available for you to take in to enhance your performance. So let's say that you have a great business idea, you know, you have the talents necessary to implement it, but what you're lacking in is drive and determination, and you're easily distracted, and you're easily discouraged. You're distracted and you're discouraged. So you look at that and you say, you know what? Mars, Aries, right? Scorpio, this type of energy would give me the drive and the determination. How do we know that? Well, you look at the moon sign of Shaq, of Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Mike Tyson, you know, and many others, right? You'll see, oh, that Mars, that martial energy, right? That's what I need. Well, there's a way to fine tune your meditation to strengthen that martial energy, to eat of that martial energy. And that's what the astrological element that we'll be discussing in the workshop, how to bring that into your meditation in terms of your timing and your technique, so that you can enhance your strengths, and you can diminish your liabilities in a particular area.
So the workshop will take place at Larchmere Arts on Saturday, January 24th from 4 to 7 p.m. We would strongly urge you to get there as early as you can, and we're looking forward to this magnificent workshop. If you just recently joined us, we've been having a conversation with Tehuti Khamau. He is the chief priest of Ausar Auset Society International in Philadelphia, and we will be welcoming him to Cleveland in a few short days. We'd like to, as always, thank you for us, and know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make yourself the best that you can possibly be. And meditation can definitely be a tool for that. Is there a website or anything that you would like to send us to before we conclude the broadcast today?
Sure. We have and we actually have a phone number that I can give out for those who want to call and get more information. And also, we'll be doing spiritual readings. For those of you familiar with that, you'll be able to get some insight into your direction for 2026. So to make an appointment, you can call 216-556-4859. That's 216-556-4859. Sister My aunt will be there.
All right. Well, thanks for that information, and we'll definitely get that out. And thanks for joining us on another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make it a great day. Peace.
Thank you. Peace and blessings.
My brothers. So
Good.
many more questions that I want